one English artist called Gopal, who had painted Srila Prabhupada standing close to the lake on the property. And George really liked that painting of Prabhupada. And he liked the location, and he liked the price as well. Previously in 1972, there's some footage of this, of George and Prabhupada visiting another property called Runnymede Farm. Now, Runnymede Farm is right on the banks of the River Thames. Runnymede is a very historical place. That's where the Magna Carta was signed, way back in the 13th century, early 13th century, by the King of England, King John, at that time. And so that was the only time that Prabhupada actually came to see one of the properties that I'd arranged for George to see as well. Prabhupada was also interested. And the farm hadn't been used for about 3 or 4 years, so it was all overgrown. So when George arrived and he looked around, he said they should call this farm Runny Down Farm, not Runnymede Farm. And we walked around, and there was some footage of that. I can't remember actually even who took the film. I know that Shyam Sundar was also there. And
Paddy as well.
no, not Paddy, just George. George came in his Porsche from Friar Park. And this older English devotee called Bhakti Pramod, he worked as a security manager for the Midland Bank, the British bank, the Midland Bank. And he actually drove us. He drove Shyam Sundar and Prabhupada and myself in his car to the property. He liked to do that. He loved to fuss around Prabhupada, and he called Prabhupada Your Grace. You know, he never called Prabhupada Prabhupada. He would say, how is your grace this morning? Are you feeling cold? I've got a travel blanket. I'd like to tuck this travel blanket around your legs so you don't get the cold on your... You know, he was really quite a fascinating, intriguing kind of person. And he also liked Highland dancing, Scottish Highland dancing. I remember him and his wife, Yashoda Mai, they came to visit Prabhupada for an evening darshan at the very place. And he was in his full Highland dress kit with a kilt. And he came in and he paid his obeisances, and his wife paid her obeisances. And he had his tweed jacket on, he had the kilt with the sporran and the long stockings with the ski and do, that little knife tucked into the top of the stockings, and he was sitting on the floor, and he didn't, because he was elderly, he was like in his mid to late 50s actually, and he couldn't sit really cross-legged properly on the carpet, so he had his knees up in the air and with his kilt, and Prabhupada was like looking straight, up his kilt. And Prabhupada was looking and said, what is that you're wearing? And he said, oh, this is typical Scottish dress, Your Grace, because we just come back from, some Highland dancing. And then Prabhupada looked and he said, you're feeling comfortable in that skirt? Or would you prefer to sit in a chair? Because he was like, kind of exposing himself to Srila Prabhupada. Anyway, this is the same person that drove Prabhupada. He would drive him to Rath Yatra, to wherever Prabhupada wanted to go. Sometimes he would try to get Prabhupada to go on like little tours around London. He wanted to take Prabhupada to see the Roman ruins. Because, London is a very ancient city, and the Romans established the first city called Londinium, and there's still some Roman walls of some ramparts and things like that. And he took him around and showed him Buckingham Palace and different places. London Bridge. So Prabhupada actually liked Bhakti Pramod a lot. And so there we were in this Runnymede farm, and we walk up to the main house, and I remember it was quite an impressive build. It wasn't like like a standard farmhouse. This was a house with some substance. It had large column pillars at the front, high vaulted ceilings and a beautiful staircase. It was like a small stately home on the property. So I remember we're standing there with Srila Prabhupada, all of us, including George, and we're just discussing the possibility of moving into this property. And then Prabhupada stopped us and said, so before we move in, first, he said, beside this house we will build a bank. And then he pointed to Bhakti Pramod and he said, and you will be the bank manager, because you have some experience in banking, because you work for this, world famous Midland bank. And then he pointed his finger at George and he said, George, you will deposit all your money in that bank, and we will spend everything in Krishna's service. George was like taken aback, like, all my money will go. And we all laughed when Prabhupada came out, because that was, that was completely unexpected that he would say something like that. I don't know if I told you the story about how we acquired the manor from this Scottish lady, Mrs. Ruffles. She was from Aberdeen, which is a town, a city in northern Scotland. And you know the story about the Scots being quite mean, but even in Scotland, people from Aberdeen who are called Aberdonians are considered extremely mean. And but she, not only was she from Aberdeen, but she was also Jewish. So she was a Jewish Aberdonian. And what she had done was, before we'd actually moved into the property, she had removed every single doorknob from every single door. She had taken the brass door knocker. It was a lion's head. It was actually two. There's a pair of these door knockers on the front doors to the house, and she had removed those. She had removed all the pelmets. She had siphoned off all the diesel fuel from the tanks, for the central heating. She had taken away all the coal, because there was also a lot of fireplaces in the big rooms. So in some places where Prabhupada wanted to see the rooms, because there was a number of rooms, he really wanted to go like an inspection. There's a couple of doors we couldn't open because there's no doorknob there's no door handle or anything to open the door to get into the rooms. We had to show him later on. And then finally, when we showed him his quarters upstairs, he was very, very happy. He said, yes, this is a nice facility for the spiritual master, because he had a huge living room and a huge old-fashioned bathroom and a very comfortable bedroom. So when George came back from his visit to Los Angeles, one of the first things he did was he made a point of actually coming and visiting the manor. And we took him on the tour of every place, of all the rooms and everything, because by that time we'd gotten a hold of door handles and doorknobs and things like that. So he was really curious about everything, and he wanted to see the kitchen garden. He wanted to see the lake and everything. So we showed him all these places, and I remember actually Shyam Sundar, he brought him to the temple room and he said, "Wouldn't some beautiful crystal chandeliers look really great in this temple room?" And George said, "Yeah, that'd be really nice." And so he got George to pay for a pair of crystal chandeliers. They cost like £3,000, and he had just bought this place for us as well. On top of that, Anyway, but he liked it. I mean, he thought it was value for money. So I was just going to say, by 1980, we were still obviously, living at the manor, worshipping Radha Gokulananda, and there were many Indian businessmen who wanted to get involved in what we were doing at the manor, and they knew that there was a lot of restoration work and repairs had to be done, and plus we had to build a car park. But they didn't want to give their money because they would ask, ultimately, well, who owns this property? Does ISKCON own it, or does somebody else own it? And we had to tell them, actually, it's owned by George's foundation. So they would say, well, is he to be trusted? I mean, if he decided one day he didn't like you Hare Krishnas anymore, he could just say, all right, get out of there. There's nothing in writing, there's no agreement, no legal binding document, and you'd be out in your ear. And we'd be given all these donations for nothing,